All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 87 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Breitman. What a weird day. Wednesday, June 7th. I work in New York City. I'm going home soon, and it's just a complete hazy nightmare, I guess you could say. And I work in a building with glass windows and everything, and it's just a very strange day with the wildfires from Canada, all the haze and smoke and everything lingering down. Last night was really bad too. And it's been a very slow news day. And I will be honest, I'm working off the cuff a little bit. And I didn't have anything planned and nothing really came about. And I kind of shoot from the hip sometimes on certain days. July is going to be a month where I kind of had to plan ahead and have topics ready. But the news cycle has been so quick lately. And I think, some things could break soon, but didn't want to delay, and I thought that I would take this opportunity. It's going to be a little bit of a ramble, but just in terms of things that I noticed, from my point of view, running and owning a Rutgers athletics content site, also having covered on the banks, I've covered Rutgers athletics for 8 years now. The athletic department's in a lot better shape than it was 8 years ago. I've written about this just in terms of when I, started at On the Banks. It was 2015. It was the year Kyle Flood, Julie Herman got fired, Eddie Jordan got fired, within the year. So it was a pretty tumultuous time. And I've been a fan of Rutgers sports since the 80s when I was a kid. So I've seen a lot. There's people, Rutgers fans, that have seen more than me over the years. There's some have seen less. But one thing I've noticed in particular in recent years, sorry about that, was just that it's gotten tense sometimes and occasionally within the fan base. And, it's frustrating to see. I've written before a few years ago about embracing the hate from all the other Big Ten fan bases. We know about Indiana. We've had multiple fan bases. I think it's funny how certain Big Ten fan bases reacted to Rutgers in the past, how they react to them now. I feel like Rutgers fans really want Penn State to happen in terms of a fan rivalry. I honestly don't think Penn State fans really care. But there are other Big Ten fan bases that love to get on Rutgers. And I think that's part of it, right? That's part of embracing being in the Big Ten. It's part of embracing high major athletics. And it's something I think to have fun with. What I don't like is when there's internal fighting within the fan base. And it's, online. It's we forget sometimes we get in this microcosm of what happens on social media is fully representative of everything, in terms of uh, how the whole fan base feels. And social media interaction is just a small part of what, representative of the entire fan base. But you see a lot more and more nowadays, just in terms of, there's definitely that football versus basketball divide with some. And I've disliked it for a long time. I get that people are frustrated. People are frustrated with football. Um, it's been a decade since football has been good. I think some people maybe got their hopes up when Greg Schiano came back that it would be a quicker fix than it's been. I get that people are upset. People are, I saw a tweet. College Football Talk Daily is a really good follow an account on Twitter and was talking about how Greg Schiano might be on the hot seat after this season. I don't think that's true at all. I know that some fans are losing their patience, but he inherited a very difficult situation, a roster that was nowhere near Big Ten quality. Yes, we want results. Yes, we need to see progress. I don't think if, unless it's just an utter disaster this next season, I can't see even hot seat being talked about. He was on an 8-year contract. This is year 4. And, he got an 8-year contract for a reason because he knew it was going to take a while. And I'm really high on the coaching staff hires. There's just a lot of false narratives out there. Someone was saying how there's been a lot of turnover, and that got mentioned in the athlon sports thing that I talked about a couple of days ago, about how there's been a lot of turnover in the coaching staff. Well, no defensive coach left, and two of the offensive coaches that are back just shifted roles, Demir Shaw and Andrew Aldrich. So you only had three new hires: the offensive coordinator Kirk Shiraka, Dave Brock, wide receiver coach, um, and then Pat Flaherty, offensive line. Yes, Shiano's initial offensive coordinator did not work out, Sean Gleason, but he's made a change. I think he's made a change for the better in terms of continuity and strategy, philosophy, everything. So that's a good thing. But there's just a lot of false narratives get put out there by other fan bases, by the media, by the national media that doesn't really know what's going on. So I get extra frustrated when I see fans, Rutgers fans, doing it amongst ourselves. There's the NIL piece right now. There's lots of stuff spraying around that, Rutgers is in trouble with NIL. It can always be better. I think there's a lot of positive things being worked on. But I think Rutgers is in a better shape NIL than people necessarily think or want to believe. I think some people just hate NIL. I think some people just want to panic. I think some people want to see, I hate to say it, one sport succeed over another. Wink, wink. And, it's just, it's frustrating. Basketball has had a lot of success. Steve Peichel has done a lot. One argument that I absolutely can't stand is when people say it's easier to turn basketball around than football because they just cite that you need more players. But when you deal with financials and business, and it's never about raw numbers, it's about the percentages and getting four quality, high 3-4 star recruits in basketball, right, is really not that much different than getting quality 25 recruits for football. It's the percentages in terms of spots on your roster, available recruits, transfers, all that. So when people say, "Oh, I hate that narrative that basketball is easier to turn around than football," and my argument too is that for Rutgers basketball, anything Rutgers wise is harder, right? We do it to ourselves. The RU screw, being students, stuff you have to deal with, alumni, messaging, um, just it always seems like things are harder with Rutgers, whether it's internal or perception, location, everything. And I think that talking about, progress, right? Rutgers basketball, turning around Rutgers basketball was not like turning around just a bad high major program, and not to mention they were 279th in Ken Palm when Peichel took over, but there was 30 years of, or 20 whatever years of negative history, of scandals, of a lack of support. There wasn't air conditioning in the rack when he got. I mean, there was so much against him. So I just hate anything that's talked about as like undermining the progress that's been made. With football, same thing. I mean, I think patience is needed. I know people don't want to have patience. It's not about football versus basketball. It's not about Peichel versus Shiano. It's not about we shouldn't be spending money here. It should be put over there. Everybody needs everything, and the Olympic sports need it too. And there was something that came out this week about Olympic sports spending, and Rutgers was on the high end for Power Five, and that's a good thing. And part of that is location and cost of living and all that, and things cost money. And the newspapers from time to time try to spin scandals and say, Rutgers spent X amount of money on their athletes, and with no context whatsoever. There's just a lot of negative forces out there, always trying to bring Rutgers down, and it stinks. So I hate it even more when I see our own fans contributing to that. And listen, debate, disagreements, all that is welcomed. Criticism of Rutgers sports is welcomed. As fans, we should be critical. We should be demanding. We should have high expectations. I'm not saying football shouldn't be better at this point, and we want it to be better. I shouldn't say, basketball at the end of the season was very disappointing. I know a lot of, wrestling first fans were very disappointed, but there's also a lot of positives too. And all three programs, by the way, are showing signs of life on the recruiting trail and showing progress right now. So, I'm not one that say you can't be critical. Some people say, "Oh, recruits feed everything. You can't write negative things." Well, sure, you can be critical when it's fair, but taking shots, creating false narratives, lying. You know, you see some interesting stuff on message boards these days that you know not going to get into, but certain things you see that maybe you might have a certain point of view for a reason, or um, isn't just kind of giving proper context or perspective. And you don't have to be a fan of Rutgers for 40 years to have perspective, right? It helps. And listen, certain fans of a certain age, and I'm unfortunately starting to get in that category. We could be jaded too. We're a tortured fan base for a lot of reasons, and I love Pat Hobbs's mantra of wanting. He always says, and he reminds me whenever I speak to him about removing the long suffering in front of Rutgers fans, how we describe ourselves, and he's done a lot of positive things. Of course, things could always be better, but we are making progress. And unfortunately, it takes time and it takes money. And the Big Ten funding still hasn't fully come through, and it's going to be soon. And the TV deal and expansion, and there's going to be more money, more money, more money. And things are going to continue to get better. This past year was definitely a step back, and I'm waiting to do stuff on the Directors Cup and all that until track is done. They're competing this week. But yeah, it was a step back, and next year is a huge year. But I do think there's a lot of great coaches at Rutgers, there's a lot of great leadership in place, and things are moving in the right direction. And, as I've mentioned many times, rebuilds and progress are not a straight line. But as fans, we have to keep our heads above the water. We can't just freak out on every negative thing that happens. We have to keep perspective and amongst each other. So on a day like today, when you walk outside and it looks like the apocalypse, it looks like we're in the Mad Max, it looks like, you know, the world can be a scary place sometimes. And we have to remember what's important. And also, when it comes to rooting for the university and the athletic department that we all love and that we support, we also have to stick together. Strength in numbers doesn't mean you agree with everything, doesn't mean you're happy about everything, doesn't mean you're not frustrated, doesn't mean you're not upset, doesn't mean you can't be critical. But at the end of the day, you know, we're all Rutgers fans. We all want the same thing. I know that's probably a little bit folksy because listen, there's certain fans of certain sports that only want certain things, but you know, that's not really the way it works in terms of where I think Rutgers as a whole is going. And football being good helps the other sports. The other sports being good helps football. And the coaches have kind of talked about that. And when people say, "Oh, we're a lacrosse school, or we're a baseball school, or we're a soccer school," or I mean, actually like that because let's be an everything sports school, and all these different sports have done well over the last few years. And um, I'm super excited for next year for all these programs, and the interest in Rutgers, the transfer portal, the way the athletes they're getting in all sports, they're getting high impact transfers in all sports. A lot of the sports have high impact recruiting classes coming in. There's really good things ahead, and I hope as a fan base we can remember that and we get through the tough times together. We've been through so many already, and if you're a younger fan, you're earning your stripes now, but that doesn't mean you're any less of a fan than me or anybody that's in their 60s or whatever. We're all Rutgers fans. We all want the same thing, and that's success, doing it the right way, and for student athletes to do their best at Rutgers and then go on to have great careers and great lives and be great alumni too. So, bit of a ramble, Covered a few things. I don't even know how I did, to be honest with you, but shooting from the hip, little smoke in my head from outside. Hope everyone stays safe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.